Good morning, everyone. Bombshell. Got a bombshell dropped on me last night, and wow. But let's get right into it. Bruce Lee's cocaine habit. And yeah, first of all, I am an unabashed Bruce Lee fan. Always have been, always will be. Many of our heroes have feet of clay, as they say. But the evidence is incontrovertible, in my opinion. Here's the evidence. Bruce Lee wrote letters to his student Bob Baker. You may remember him as the big dude who played the Russian in Fists of Fury, right? He was also apparently Bruce Lee's drug supplier. Now, Bruce Lee wrote letters to Bob Baker from Hong Kong, and apparently he called marijuana the holy stuff. So he would thank him for sending him the holy stuff. But then later, and as the letters go by, now these letters, mind you, were part of Bob Baker's estate. And now that Bob Baker died, his daughter is auctioning them for money. So, you know, I saw this on the Kung Fu Genius podcast. He showed screenshots of some of the letters who are auctioning for high prices, and will probably, when they're finally sold, will be very high prices. They were in Bruce Lee's handwriting with his signature. You don't get better than that. And there was one with Linda Lee's handwriting and her signature. And they outlined that Bruce Lee was doing quite a bit of marijuana, which, I mean, we all know that. And it was the 60s. I think everybody was doing marijuana, even some of the federal agents trying to prosecute people for it, right? Let me get my decaf. Now, so the cocaine apparently became, at one point when he was in Hong Kong, he wrote Bob Baker saying, "Can you send some cocaine? I want to see if you know how to do it, if you can do it." And he was also doing psilocybin. But when he started getting into the coke, and it looks like he sort of really got into that in his Hong Kong phase, in the very last part of his life. We're talking Enter the Dragon, Game of Death phase, but more, I think, Enter the Dragon. I'm not 100% down with the timelines of all of this. I think some of Enter the Dragon might have been something he was filming while doing Game of Death. Some of it he might have filmed beforehand. Some of you diehard Bruce Lee stat people might be able to say that in the comment section, as long as you're not insulting me or just acting stupid. But so the coke habit apparently progressed, and he started sending more letters, and his handwriting began to deteriorate, which shows sign of stress and also the coke use. What does this mean? All right, what does this mean? Well, first of all, I think we really have to think this maybe would have killed Bruce Lee, right? Cannabis doesn't really kill people. You can smoke hash and hash oil and hashish all day long. I've done cannabis. It's legal now. I'm going to certainly admit it. I've done cannabis. I've done hashish, and I don't think I've done hashish oil. There's people around me doing all kinds of cannabis medically, or they say it's medical. I think they just, they're using whatever underlying medical conditions they have to get as much hashish and pot as they want. More power to them. I do believe pot is medical, and Bruce Lee, being the hyperactive person that he was, it might have been good for him. It might have been good for him, especially the hashish brownies, which you don't have to smoke, right? At one point, Linda Lee also started asking for, sent a letter to Bob Baker and asking for the drugs. So she was part of it. She was down with it, and she probably might have been doing some of it. So Bruce Lee, with his coke habit, that I know in the 60s everybody was doing drugs. And in the 50s, actually, a lot of people were doing pills, and cannabis was more of a very, very sort of on the fringes thing, but cannabis exploded in the 60s. The cocaine, I mean, cocaine has been a part of drug culture ever since cocaine was around. And we're talking, stuff like Aztecs and Mayans and things like that, right? So what I think is we really have to honestly think if that is what contributed to Bruce Lee dying, because if you have cerebral edema, if you have, it basically has like a burst artery in his head, and cocaine does raise blood pressure. They did an autopsy and they found cannabis in his stomach, but I don't know what type of autopsy they did. I don't know how thorough. They certainly didn't have the medical tools we did today. I don't know if they could have detected cocaine in the bloodstream, right? Um, so it is possible that cocaine is what killed Bruce Lee, right? And we have to think about that. Now, what impact does this have on his legacy? Actually, I'm going to say this. The Kung Fu Genius said something like this, and I'm going to agree, but in a different way. I am glad that I learned this now rather than when I was a kid. But my reasoning is that it might have caused me to ignore Bruce Lee. It might have caused me to not really read all of his writings and examine his career and his work, and especially Jeet Kune Do. And the reason why I'm saying that is that Jeet Kune Do was a very valuable addition to my life. I studied his books as much as I could, and I practiced. And later, I got to train a little bit at the Princeton Academy of Martial Arts. I think this was in 1987 with Rick Tucci. And I got to solidify my Jeet Kune Do knowledge. But before that, and this is something I think happened in 1986, my instructor, Jeff Mack, taught a style of karate that he put together, he made up, called Goju Dao Te. Later became Goju Dao Te Taekwondo. And I'm the only active black belt left in that style. I have a 4th degree in that style. But in high school, I think this was around the time I was a green belt or maybe brown belt. I think I was a green belt around this time. I started to get really dissatisfied with point sparring, mostly because I was reading all the Bruce Lee books. And, also, I watch PKA kickboxing on TV. I'm like, this is real. This is, you do this stuff, you're really fighting, and you're really learning how to fight in a very high pressure manner. The whole word pressure tested, was not part of the vocabulary. They just called it getting in there and fight. Get in there and fight. You got to get in there and fight. And I kept telling Jeff, like, I don't want to do these point tournaments, and I want to do full contact. Is there any way we could train it? Can you find someone? And Jeff thought I was a loudmouth punk. And who knows, I might have been. But, I'm a teenager learning karate, and I want to be good at it. I want to be good at fighting. And I see what the fighters do. So I would train Jeet Kune Do in my basement. My friends Keith Oliver and Alfie Robinson in my neighborhood, they were these black kids, and they were boxers, and they would show me how to box. They would show me how to jab and train and shadow box, and the types of push-ups to do, and how to put cans of soup in my hand to shadow box with all these little things. And so finally, Jeff's like, "Here, I'll take you to Tom McGonigal's kickboxing gym in Toms River, and we'll get someone for you to spar." And what I didn't know was this guy was a ringer. He was a former pro boxer. He was a young kid, but he was pro boxer. He looked a lot older than me, and he'd been training with Tom McGonigal, and in the kickboxing. And Tom McGonigal was also Tung Sudo, and what he was going to do was turn pro in kickboxing. And so Jeff brought me there to get beat up, but I didn't know that. I thought it was just going to be a sparring session. And the kid went to town on me, threw an overhead right off the bat, right in my face, trying to knock me out. And I struggled and I fought, and somehow I made it through the first round. And end of the second round, I broke his nose, and he didn't want to come out of that corner. And so it was counted as a TKO. And also, he didn't make his mandatory 8 kicks, because back then everybody wanted to train like the PKA, right? And I really think a lot of that has to do with me reading Bruce Lee, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I worked the Jeet Kune Choi, I worked the non-telegraphic jab, the power side forward, the front leg, front hand, and I would switch leads and things like that. And it made me survive, and it was tough. I was so tired. I thought I was going to die, but I won. I fought a guy who had kickboxing training and then had been a former pro boxer. I broke his nose. I won by a TKO, even though we weren't supposed to be trying to tally points or anything. And, I did better than him. And I think that was because of the whole Bruce Lee thing. Had I known Bruce Lee was into, um, cocaine, which is a drug I don't think much of at all. I dislike it. It kills people. Has a lot of negative effects. Um, then I might have been like, yeah, forget Jeet Kune Do, forget full contact, right? It would have been a completely different outlook. But Jeet Kune Do has served me well. I still use many Jeet Kune Do training concepts and techniques, right? So yeah, it's disappointing to find out that one of your idols, was all coked up, and wish it hadn't been so. But I'm gonna show you something. Okay, this is Men's Health magazine, and in this issue of Men's Health, they have an interview with Jean-Claude Van Damme. All right, let me see if I can find it. Here's Jean-Claude Van Damme at age 60, looking good. And he talks about his coke habit. He said that he had a $10,000 a week coke habit. That adds up to about, $480 something thousand dollars a year. Almost $500,000 a year, right? And he did this for years and years. So, Bruce Lee was not the only one to have this problem. It's a Hollywood problem. It's a societal problem, right? I do think that, that may account for why he got so super skinny near the end, super ripped, right? In that coke, a lot of coke people, they don't eat much. They're just doing coke. And, the heart's pumping and it's strained and everything, the whole body. It strains and stresses the whole body system. So, if you look at Chinese Connection and Return of the Dragon, if you look at that, you'll see that he had impressive musculature in terms of mass for his size. And I think Enter the Dragon being the last movie he made, you see he's really, really ripped down, almost ridiculously so, right? And the cocaine may have had a part to deal with that. So it is a cautionary tale, people. Definitely do not get involved in coke. If he had survived, I also think there's still, a component. He might have had a genetic weakness in one of the arteries in his brain. There might have been, he was taking Equagesic, which, might have interacted with it. Medicine interacts with medicine and chemicals. And, the cocaine in his system might have interacted with the prescription meds. He also might have taken a few too many hits to his head. I value full contact sparring, but I also, unlike Bruce Lee, believe it's something to be moderated and, titrated, and be very careful about how many hits you take, especially to the head, but even hits to your legs, even hits to your body. You should, ideally other people that are dedicated to making sure you have a proper training regimen and do it safely should be supervising a multimillionaire's workout to make sure that things don't happen. And they should be monitoring his diet and his drug intake. And drug intake is the one that nobody wants monitored, right? So, it is sad because I feel like if Bruce Lee could have lived longer, he would have mellowed out. He would have changed some of his radicalism and grown into a better martial art. I also think he would have gotten back into doing forms and some of the more traditional aspects of martial art, because he would have realized there's more to martial art than just, how much ass you can kick at any given moment, right? What good is it being able to kick ass if you die at 33 like Bruce Lee did? I've always felt that, and because Bruce Lee died relatively young, I've talked to many Jeet Kune Do people, younger people, who have a very arrogant and dismissive attitude towards just about every other thing in the martial art, kind of like these MMA people, right? And so, yeah, you have something valuable, but you also have to realize there's so many other valuable things in the world, in the martial art world, right? So, I wanted to make sure that, I released that latest information. Does it change my admiration for Bruce Lee? No. Was a martial arts pioneer, fought racism, Apparently, I think some of the stressors he was involved with, may have led to his drug use. That does make sense, doesn't it? Right? And one of the stresses he dealt with that Van Damme never dealt with, for example, was racism in Hollywood, which was a real palpable thing, right? Look at the Tarantino thing. And before people say, well, maybe the cannabis is what made him an asshole, first of all, I think that's subjective whether you call him asshole or not. But a lot of his behavior started on the set of The Green Hornet and even in college. He didn't suffer fools lightly, and I don't think cocaine's an expensive habit. There's a reason why the letters show that if he had a cocaine habit, it didn't really become significant till he was in Hong Kong because he was making millions, right? And on the set of The Green Hornet, that was the start of his career. That was his personality. He was confrontational. He was dismissive of fools, right? Now, later in life, can magnify, for example, these negative aggressive traits, right? So even still, Tarantino's portrayal of Bruce Lee on the set of The Green Hornet is fraught with lies, outright lies. And then he has said that Bruce Lee image, he said it was real life, and so that's slander. I still think he should be sued and have the pants sued off of him, because I still admire Bruce Lee, but I don't admire his cocaine use. And us, we can live and learn. We can be like, well, even if you're taking medical cannabis, be careful of your doses, be careful of what you put into your body. He was Bruce Lee was very experimentational. If you read about his dieting, he went through various phases, and some of them were extreme, like congealed beef blood and things like that, right? So you've got to be, you've got to use common sense, people, in anything you do. And cocaine is a very deadly substance. Okay, it kills people. A certain amount of people die every year from it. And again, we don't know the quality of what he was doing and what he was taking alongside with it, right? So, and also I want to leave you with this message. Undefeated, two-time Civil War champion. We defeated the Confederacy once in the first Civil War, and we defeated them on January 6th. And we will continue to defeat racists, the Confederates, the neo-Nazis. Long live the United States, long live democracy, long live free and open elections, and long live access to voting for all people, whether you're white, black, gay, straight, bi, Latino, Asian American. All U.S. citizens should have the right to vote. And to those who would suppress it, you're traitors to your country. Democracy, it was worth fighting for. It's worth keeping. Thank you.